So hello everyone, welcome to this week's YouTube tutorial. If you're new here, my name is Mike Ingledew and I'm all about making you successful with your integrated product support strategies. This week I have moved down the other end of the TDW shack and I'm stood in front of my green screen, and I thought we would try and present this one in a slightly different way. Those of you who have done any of my online training courses are familiar with this format. You know that I like to stand in front of the green screens and talk to you about some of the topics and explain what's actually happening. This week I'm answering a question that came in 3 or 4 weeks ago from somebody who I know and have known for around 20-25 years in the market, somebody who is deeply passionate about technical documentation as I am, and has sent me lots of questions in the past, but I asked if I could use this one on a YouTube video. You've given me permission. I'm not going to name you and I'm not going to name your organization. And your question came in: is it normal to use unverified data modules in a final delivery? Now, I'm going to answer this. I'm going to use some slides from some of my training courses to contextualize this. And I'm going to give you a real example at the end of where bad technical documentation affected me personally. So you sent in my opinion. So the first thing is you said, in my opinion, is it acceptable to use a data module with QA status of unverified in a final delivery? Now, okay, there's a lot in here. I know your new role, that you are a CSDB administrator now. And so there's a lot in here, and you know, I never answer a question immediately. I always like to sit and mull it over. I took the question, I asked a couple of people that I respect in the S1000D community, and I got very different answers, and so we're going to talk about that from my perspective. And for those of you, I'm going to give you some background information for those of you who don't really know how S1000D controls our modules. So we're going to look at quite a lot of this. But it's also important that we know tech pubs and not just S1000D, okay? I maintain on all of my training courses, or wherever I'm talking to somebody about adopting S1000D, just adopting S1000D doesn't negate the need for understanding the role and the function of technical publications and all of those associated processes that we need to understand from a traditional technical publications perspective. So there's lots of things that are going in and going on within S1000D that rely on us knowing a little bit about how technical publications work. And this is one of those areas, which is why I think it's a great question. So what do we mean by use would be my first comeback here, and I'm going to step out of the way. You're saying that you're going to a final delivery, and are we actually going to be delivering something that's actually going to be used in anger? Or are we delivering a draft document? Is your final delivery a draft document and then somebody else is going to take it on? Or are you contracted to deliver your XML to be unverified? And then I'm going to talk about a specific workflow very shortly in my next couple of slides. So my first question would be, how are we expected to make that final delivery? And there are reasons why we would do any one of these. There are reasons how and why that would work. So I would question first and foremost what it is that we talk about. Now over here is my S1000D data module, and with the identification status section and the content section. So question number one that I would want to ask myself, and you have two different keywords in there that I picked up: use and final. So when we mean use, are we talking about the example I'm going to give you on the final slide very shortly? And final, as in we're giving you the data, that's it. We're not going to be giving you anything else, okay? So, but to do that, we need to understand how S1000D gives us controls over our data modules. And that's what I'm going to talk about right now. I'm going to let this build in This is something that we go through on my training courses in a little bit more detail. And there are lots of areas of the data module that we can control, and we can identify that it's at a specific issue state, an issue or version, and what the quality assurance state is. So we're not going to go through all of these because these actually have direct relationships, and this also has a relationship here, and there are rules within S1000D way outside of the scope of a YouTube tutorial, but this is something that we would work through on one of my training courses. So, but you are asking specifically about here, we have the quality assurance of our data module, and we can have it verified or unverified, and there are different states of that verification. Again, it's in the S1000D specification. I've just made it look pretty. Go and read the spec and you'll see what I'm talking about. But you're talking about, can we give this data module as an end deliverable in a final delivery at the state of unverified? And again, I've asked people their opinion, and I'm getting polar opposite answers. There is nothing really in S1000D that's stopping us from doing that, but there things in a technical publications process that should be stopping us from doing that. So again, you can go and check out all of these and how these all talk to each other and why they talk to each other. And they are direct and implied relationships between these from a technical publications knowledge perspective and from an S1000D process perspective. So we're not going to go into that in much detail, but I want to talk a little bit about a verification process. Now, this is an example process of a particular customer that I support, and you know, we have this linear process that they have in place. So let's just talk about this specifically here. So we have the author is assigned a data module, does the work, and on that previous slide there are relationships between these buckets and what happens in all of those elements and attributes that I talked about on the previous slide. And we might have an author will start writing, there might be a peer review, and there would be an informal kind of review process here. And we have in this particular organization an engineering department which has an informal review process again, where this data module is going through its early stages. And we're talking here about a baby data module. We're talking something that's just come in into being. And you can see here that from that previous slide, we've pulled out what's going on. So it's a brand new data module and it's unverified. And then we might move into a more formal review cycle where it goes to the QA department. It actually, in this organization, goes to a compliance team. And it might then actually go out to a customer who does the second verification. So what we're saying here is that we have this verification process. We have, which more than in this organization actually works in an informal way. So they'll sit with their peers, they'll sit with an engineering team. Is this what you wanted? Yes, no, do all of those things. And there's what is known as drafting going on in here. So the S1000D gives us a methodology for controlling that. And then we start going into a formal review cycle, and the QA department does their thing, and the compliance team does their thing, and there's lots of different things that are happening here. They do a verification at their particular level, and in this organization, the second verification, if we're using it in this particular organization, they do, the content goes to a customer, and the customer will actually go and do the verification of the actual content on the actual piece of equipment itself. So this is how it's working. Now, at all of these levels, we have the ability to track formal feedback, formal comments way outside the scope of today, but we have the ability to capture these and send them back to the author for incorporation, and they can check in, check out, make their changes, and control and update the data module accordingly. So this is a typical kind of process. And Your process might be slightly different, but this one is a real life process that's being used out there in the wide world right now. And I've got permission to show this. Again, I'm not going to mention anybody. So this is kind of a linear workflow. Now on my training courses, I would have some animations over the top here showing you the in-work numbers, the issue numbers and all that kind of stuff changing as we work through a process. There's actually a second slide to this, and that's what we do. So S1000D gives us control, deep control over our content and our data modules. So, but we are free to do what we like, but we have to assess what the business risk is, and I'm going to come on to that shortly. And also, what is it our business rules are telling us? Now, actually, to put this into context for this particular tutorial, I nearly said your name then. The person that asked me this question went back, consulted the business rules. The business rules said that all data modules must come to the customer at first verification status. So therefore, if we'd have delivered it in unverified, it would have actually been or should have been rejected anyway. So, but it's actually the business rules did say that it would be that they must come as verified. And there were some other settings that needed to be set in there. But also we have business rules decisions about, are we actually going to allow the exchanging of draft data modules between each other? But that implies, if it's a draft, implies that we are actually going to just be reviewing it, updating it, and putting it through that kind of linear workflow that I showed you previously. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the business risk? And what do our business rules say? What do our rules say when it comes to delivering our data modules? So when we talk about technical publications, we do have best practice when it comes to our technical publications. And if we are saying to somebody, or if we're giving somebody content that's unverified, we should say so in the deliverable. Now, I'm just surmising here that you are either giving a PDF or an IETP. My suspicion is you're probably giving XML, but we should identify clearly that the content has been is still subject to verification, and that that then makes it clear to our end user that it's an at-risk thing here. So, we should, from a best practice, make sure that the end user has absolutely, or the recipient has absolutely a clear understanding that this is draft or unverified content. Okay, so most IETPs will give you or flag this based on what the identification and status section on that previous slide where all of those things were happening will actually extract that and show that. We can also, in publishing engines, have that information extracted from that same content, from those same elements and attributes, and have them published across the PDFs, if that's how we so desire. But I want to give you a real example of where a poor technical publication has been issued, and it's affected me personally. And more recently, in fact, I laughed when I read the technical publication. So for those of you who are following me on Instagram and that kind of stuff, I've recently been authorized by my wife to go and purchase myself a motorcycle. So I purchased this motorcycle, wonderful piece of engineering, but I wanted to fit something to the bike. I knew I wanted to fit something as soon as I purchased it. And to do that, I had to access to the fuel system. I had to do something in the fuel system, and it was disturbing a gasket. And this gasket's quite critical. And so it has, in the technical publication itself, it had critical torque values. And it told me how to reset the gasket. And in the order I had to see, when you're working in fuel systems, there's normally an order that you have to tighten up bolts and those kind of things to ensure that things are sitting flush. So the technical publication for this particular modification I was doing to this motorcycle was actually something I needed to do. But the technical publication, the issued technical publication to me, the end customer, the end user, said, subject to change, and we are not responsible for any typos. I mean, really? So how am I supposed to trust this content? How am I supposed to put my belief and faith in that I'm following these instructions, but are they correct? Are they right? Now, what was ironic, of course, is that it had a quality assurance stamp on there and was actually signed by somebody to say that they had verified the content, yet the content itself was telling me that we know that it might not be great content. So I wanted to give a real life, if we are issuing content, we need to say that it might be rubbish, but we have to understand the consequence of that. So my thoughts on this is that when you ask the question, is it normal? No, it's not normal in my view, but can we do it? Absolutely. It depends on your workflows and it depends on what your customer or your partner needs. That's because sometimes we might have to issue or share a data module with somebody at unverified so they can verify that data module with another data module at the same time, and they will change the verification status of that. But are we actually going out to a final deliverable, i.e. somebody who's going to be disturbing a fuel system and expecting the technical publication to be accurate and a single source of truth for me to follow? You wouldn't normally be publishing something that is unverified. So I hope that answered your question. I hope that gave you a little bit of insight into how the technical publications processes work with the S1000D processes and why it helps to understand how they both work together. I say that, you know, most people can pick up the S1000D specification and kind of understand what's going on, but to really understand what's going on, you need to understand the other kind of non-S1000D processes, technical publications processes, requirements, and those things that are going on outside of the specification. And so that was my answer to that. You agreed for me to put it onto YouTube. I hope it was useful, and more than happy for you guys to share your comments with me. I'm enjoying receiving all of the feedback and the messages that you guys are sending me. And I hope that you found that useful and interesting. If you're interested in more of our training courses, please do get in touch. And if you want to go into more detail around that kind of stuff, consider joining TDW as a full subscriber, and we'll go into more detail on these slides. That's it. Until next week. I have no idea what I'm talking about next week. I've got a whole raft of things that have come in, but I hope you found that useful, interesting, beneficial. Go and read the specification and you'll learn more about all of those things that I put in nice, colourful boxes. Until next week, stay safe. See you on the other side.